The heavy mahogany door swung open without warning, and Amara froze mid-spin, her bare feet planted on the gleaming marble floor of the grand ballroom. Her headphones blasted Afrobeat music so loudly she hadn't heard the footsteps approaching. Her worn uniform dress swirled around her knees as momentum carried her forward one more step, and then she saw him. Marcus Okonkwo stood in the doorway, his 6'3" frame casting a long shadow across the polished floor. His dark eyes, usually as cold and unreadable as stone, were fixed on her with an intensity that made her blood run cold. The billionaire tech mogul never smiled, never showed warmth, and in the 3 months Amara had worked in his Chicago mansion, he had spoken exactly 7 words to her. Not 8. She had counted. Time seemed to stop. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might break through. Her hands, which had been raised gracefully above her head moments ago, fell limply to her sides. The music continued pumping through her headphones, a cheerful rhythm that now felt like a cruel joke. Marcus took one step into the room. Then another. His Italian leather shoes clicked against the marble with the precision of a judge's gavel. Amara wanted to run, to disappear, to sink into the floor itself. She had been explicitly told by Mrs. Chin, the head housekeeper, that Mr. Okonkwo's spaces were sacred. The ballroom, and used for years, was supposed to be dusted and vacuumed, nothing more. Dancing in it like she owned the place was grounds for immediate termination. But she couldn't move. Fear had turned her legs to concrete. Marcus stopped 3 feet away from her. Up close, she could see the sharp cut of his jaw, the way his expensive black suit fit him perfectly, the slight furrow between his brows. He was 35 years old and owned half of the tech companies in Illinois, or so the other staff whispered. He was known for firing employees over the smallest infractions. Last month, he had dismissed his personal driver for being 2 minutes late. Amara finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Mr. Okonkwo, I'm so sorry. I was just..." He raised one hand, cutting her off. The gesture was so commanding that her words died in her throat. For a long moment, he simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, something changed in his face. His eyes softened just a fraction, and the corner of his mouth twitched. "You missed a step," he said, his deep voice filling the cavernous room. Amara blinked. "What?" "The second turn. You were offbeat." He tilted his head slightly. "Show me again." The world tilted on its axis. Amara felt dizzy, confused, certain she had misheard him. "Sir, I don't understand." "The dance," Marcus said, his tone flat and businesslike, as if he were discussing quarterly reports. "Do it again. From the beginning." This couldn't be happening. The Marcus Okonkwo, the man who once made a business partner wait 4 hours because the man had worn brown shoes to a black tie event, was asking his maid to dance. In his ballroom. The ballroom no one was allowed to use. Amara's mind raced through possibilities. Was this a test? A cruel game before he fired her? She needed this job desperately. Her mother's medical bills were piling up back in Atlanta, and her younger brother Jamal was counting on her to send money for his college textbooks. Getting fired wasn't an option. But something in Marcus's eyes made her hesitate. Beneath the cold exterior, she saw something she couldn't quite name. A flicker of something that looked almost like loneliness. "I don't have any music," she stammered, gesturing weakly to her headphones, which had fallen around her neck. Marcus pulled out his phone, tapped it twice, and suddenly, music filled the ballroom through hidden speakers. Not the Afrobeat she had been listening to, but something classical and beautiful, with a rhythm that made her heart ache. It was a waltz, slow and elegant, the kind of music that belonged in a room like this. "Now," Marcus said, stepping back to give her space. "Dance." Amara's hands trembled as she took her position. This was insane. Completely insane. But something in her, the part that had always loved dancing since she was a little girl in her grandmother's living room in Lagos, responded to the music. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to move. She forgot about the fear. She forgot about the powerful man watching her. She forgot about everything except the music and the way her body knew instinctively how to flow with it. Her feet glided across the marble, her arms extended with natural grace, her whole being lost in the rhythm. When the music ended, she opened her eyes to find Marcus standing much closer than before. His expression had changed completely. The coldness was gone, replaced by something raw and vulnerable that made him look years younger. "Where did you learn to dance like that?" he asked quietly. "My grandmother," Amara replied, her voice steadier now. "She was a dancer in Nigeria before she came to America. She taught me everything." Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. Then he did something that would change both their lives forever. He extended his hand toward her, palm up, in the universal invitation to dance. "Show me," he said. And as Amara's fingers touched his, as the music began again and Marcus Okonkwo, the man who never smiled, never showed emotion, never let anyone close, pulled her into a waltz position, she realized that nothing would ever be the same again. But she had no idea just how dangerous this moment would become, or that the secrets Marcus was hiding would soon threaten everything she held dear. 3 months earlier, Amara had stood outside the towering mansion on the north shore of Chicago with her single suitcase and a prayer on her lips. The house looked like something from a magazine, all modern glass and steel mixed with classic stonework, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people's annual salary. She had applied for the housekeeping position out of desperation. After her mother's stroke, the medical bills had avalanched beyond control. Her job at the diner in Atlanta barely covered rent, and when her landlord raised it again, Amara knew she needed a miracle. The listing for a live-in maid position in Chicago had seemed too good to be true. Room and board included, salary triple what she was making, full benefits. The only catch was the employer's reputation. "Mr. Okonkwo is very particular," Mrs. Chen had said during the phone interview, her accent crisp and efficient. "He values privacy above all else. No gossip, no questions, no deviation from your duties. Can you handle that?" Amara had said yes without hesitation. She would have agreed to almost anything at that point. The reality of working for Marcus Okonkwo proved even more challenging than she'd imagined. The mansion had 23 rooms, and Amara was one of 5 staff members responsible for keeping it immaculate. There was Mrs. Chen, the head housekeeper, who ran the household with military precision. Thomas, the chef, who prepared elaborate meals that Marcus often didn't eat. Martin, the driver, who spent most of his time waiting in the garage. And David, the security guard, who monitored the cameras and gates. Marcus himself was a ghost. He left for his office downtown before sunrise and returned after dark. On weekends, he locked himself in his study. The few times Amara glimpsed him in those first weeks, he moved through the house like a shadow, never making eye contact, never acknowledging the staff's existence beyond a curt nod. "Don't take it personally," Thomas had told her one evening in the kitchen. He was a middle-aged man from Mississippi with kind eyes and gentle hands that could create culinary masterpieces. Mr. Okonkwo wasn't always like this. Something happened about 2 years ago. Changed him completely. He used to throw parties, host charity events, smile sometimes. Now he's just empty. Amara had been curious but knew better than to ask questions. She focused on her work, sending money home every week, video calling Jamal to check on his classes, and texting her mother's nurse for daily updates. The job was isolating, the other staff kept to themselves, and Amara had no time for a social life, but it was manageable. Until she discovered the ballroom. It had happened by accident. Mrs. Chen had been sick with the flu, and she'd asked Amara to handle the third-floor rooms she usually managed herself. One of those rooms was the ballroom, a massive space with soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The moment Amara stepped inside, she fell in love. The room was magnificent, but there was a sadness to it, a sense of something beautiful left to waste. Dust covered the windowsills, and the chandeliers hung dark and lifeless. As she cleaned, she imagined what the space must have looked like, filled with people, music, and laughter. On impulse, she had plugged in her headphones and started one of her grandmother's old playlists. The music filled her ears, and before she knew it, she was moving. Dancing had always been her escape, her way of processing emotions too big for words. In that moment, in that beautiful forgotten room, she felt free for the first time since arriving in Chicago. She started returning to the ballroom whenever she could. Always when Marcus was at work, always careful to finish her other duties first. It became her secret sanctuary, the one place where she could be herself instead of just the invisible help. Mrs. Chen recovered and never mentioned reassigning the ballroom, so Amara kept cleaning it, kept dancing in it, kept feeling alive in it. She should have known it couldn't last. The day Marcus walked in on her had started like any other. She had woken at 5 in the morning, helped Thomas prep breakfast, cleaned the guest suites on the second floor, and polished the hardwood in the dining room until it gleamed. Marcus had left for work at his usual time, his face set in its customary expressionless mask as he passed her in the hallway without acknowledgement. By 2 in the afternoon, Amara had finished everything on her checklist except the ballroom. She climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, her cleaning supplies in hand, already feeling the anticipation of her private dance session building in her chest. The ballroom was flooded with afternoon sunlight when she entered. Lake Michigan sparkled beyond the windows, and the crystal chandeliers caught the light, casting rainbow prisms across the walls. Amara set down her supplies and pulled out her phone, scrolling to her grandmother's playlist. She selected a song that always made her heart soar, put in her headphones, and hit play. The music transported her immediately. She closed her eyes and began to move, her body responding to rhythms she'd known since childhood. She spun and leaped, lost in memories of her grandmother's tiny apartment in Lagos, where they would dance together while her grandmother told stories of her youth, of performing on stages across West Africa. Amara didn't hear the car pull into the driveway 3 hours early. Didn't hear Marcus's footsteps on the stairs. Didn't hear the door open. She only knew he was there when she spun around and found him watching her, his dark eyes intense and unreadable, and her entire world came crashing down around her. Now, as they stood together in that same ballroom, Marcus's hand extended toward hers, Amara felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. Taking his hand meant stepping into unknown territory, potentially dangerous territory. But something in his eyes called to her, something broken and lonely that recognized the same brokenness and loneliness in her. She took his hand. Marcus pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers in the proper waltz position. He moved stiffly at first, his body tense, as if he'd forgotten how to let go. But as the music swelled and Amara followed his lead, something shifted. His movements became smoother, more natural, and for just a moment, the cold mask slipped completely away. They danced across the marble floor, neither speaking, the only sound the classical music filling the vast space. Amara couldn't help but wonder who had taught him to waltz with such precision, and why this beautiful room had been abandoned for so long. When the song ended, Marcus stepped back abruptly, the mask slamming back into place. He straightened his tie and cleared his throat. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice once again flat and emotionless. "Same time. Be here." Before Amara could respond, he turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving her standing alone in the afternoon sunlight, her heart racing and her mind spinning with questions she didn't dare ask. The mansion felt different after that first dance. Amara moved through her duties in a daze, hyper-aware of every sound, every shadow, wondering if Marcus would appear around each corner. But he didn't. In fact, for the rest of that day and all the next morning, he seemed to avoid her completely, leaving even earlier than usual and staying locked in his study when he was home. By 2 o'clock the following afternoon, Amara stood outside the ballroom door, her heart hammering. Part of her hoped Marcus had forgotten his command. The logical part of her brain screamed that this was dangerous, that getting involved with her employer in any capacity beyond her professional duties was a recipe for disaster. But a deeper part, the part that had seen something raw and vulnerable in his eyes when they danced, made her turn the handle and step inside. Marcus was already there. He stood by the windows, his back to the door, staring out at the lake. He'd removed his suit jacket, and his white dress shirt was rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms. The afternoon light caught the edges of his profile, softening the harsh lines of his face. "Close the door," he said without turning around. Amara obeyed, her mouth suddenly dry. "Mr. Okonkwo, Marcus." He finally turned to face her, When we're in this room, call me Marcus. The intimacy of the request stunned her into silence. In 3 months, she had never called him anything but Mr. Okonkwo or Sir. Using his first name felt like crossing a line drawn in permanent marker. I don't think that's appropriate, Amara managed. Nothing about this is appropriate, Marcus replied, a hint of something that might have been humor flickering across his face. But I'm asking anyway. Please. That last word, spoken so quietly, so genuinely, broke through her defenses. Marcus. He moved to his phone, which rested on a small table near the wall. With a tap, music began to play again. This time it was different, slower, more melancholy, with a melody that seemed to ache. Marcus extended his hand. Dance with me. Over the next 2 hours, they danced. Marcus was a skilled partner, technically perfect, but there was a stiffness to his movements that spoke of long disuse. Amara found herself naturally taking the lead at times, showing him how to loosen his shoulders, how to let the music guide him rather than fighting against it. They didn't speak beyond simple instructions. Turn here. Lift your arm higher. Follow the rhythm, not the beat. But in the silence between words, something unspoken passed between them. A connection that went deeper than language. When the music finally stopped, Marcus stepped back, slightly breathless. A thin sheen of sweat dampened his forehead, and his hair, usually perfectly styled, had fallen slightly out of place. He looked more human than Amara had ever seen him. Thank you, he said simply. Why are you doing this? The question burst out of Amara before she could stop it. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked. No. Marcus held up a hand. It's a fair question. He walked to the windows, his hands clasped behind his back. For a long moment, he said nothing, and Amara wondered if she'd pushed too far. This was my wife's room, Marcus finally said, his voice so quiet Amara had to strain to hear it. Keisha. She loved to dance. She used to throw charity galas here, fundraisers for arts programs in underprivileged schools. This room was alive with music and people and joy. She was alive with it. Amara's breath caught. It was past tense. 2 years ago, she was driving home from one of her events. A drunk driver ran a red light. Marcus's shoulders tensed. She died instantly. They told me she didn't suffer, as if that was supposed to make it better. The pain in his voice was so raw that Amara felt tears sting her eyes. I'm so sorry. After she died, I locked this room. Couldn't bear to see it empty, to remember how full of life it used to be. I threw myself into work, shut everyone out. It was easier than feeling anything at all. He turned to face Amara, and she was shocked to see moisture glistening in his eyes. But yesterday when I saw you dancing, so free and joyful, it was like Keisha was back in this room. For the first time in 2 years, I remembered what it felt like to want something besides the next business deal. Amara didn't know what to say. The grief radiating from Marcus was palpable, a living thing that filled the space between them. She would have liked you, Marcus continued, a sad smile crossing his face. Keisha always said dancing revealed a person's true soul. She would have seen yours and recognized something beautiful. I'm sure she was wonderful, Amara said softly. She was. She was everything. Marcus's voice broke slightly on the last word. He cleared his throat, straightening his shoulders as if physically rebuilding his walls. Tomorrow. Same time. It wasn't a question. Before Amara could respond, Marcus walked past her and out of the ballroom, leaving behind only the faint scent of his cologne and the weight of his grief. That night, Amara lay in her small room on the first floor, staring at the ceiling. She should quit. Should walk away before the situation became more complicated. But she thought of her mother's medical bills, of Jamal's tuition, of the responsibility she carried for her family. And she thought of the look in Marcus's eyes when he talked about his wife. The bone-deep loneliness she recognized because it mirrored her own. She would stay. At least for now. The following afternoon, she returned to the ballroom. And the afternoon after that. And the one after that. It became their routine. Every day at 2 o'clock, Amara would slip into the ballroom and Marcus would be waiting. They would dance for hours, the outside world fading away until only the music and movement remained. Slowly, Marcus began to open up. He told her about meeting Keisha in college at Northwestern, how she had approached him at a campus dance and demanded he stop being so serious and have some fun. He described their wedding, a massive celebration that blended his Nigerian heritage with her African-American roots. He talked about her laugh, her passion for helping others, the way she could light up a room just by walking into it. In return, Amara shared her own stories. She told Marcus about her grandmother in Lagos, about learning to dance in that cramped apartment with music playing from an old radio. She talked about her mother's stroke, about the guilt she felt being so far away when her family needed her. She described Jamal's dreams of becoming an engineer, how proud she was of him. As days turned into weeks, the conversations deepened. Marcus wanted to know everything about her favorite foods, her childhood dreams, the books she loved, the movies that made her cry. And Amara found herself equally curious about him, asking about his work, his travels, his thoughts on everything from music to politics. The other staff noticed the change in Marcus. Thomas commented on how Mr. Okonkwo actually smiled when he came down for breakfast now. Mrs. Chen remarked that he'd started eating the dinners prepared for him instead of letting them go to waste. Martin mentioned that Marcus had asked him about his family for the first time in 2 years. But none of them knew about the ballroom, about the daily dance sessions that had become the center of both Marcus's and Amara's existence. 6 weeks after that first dance, Marcus arrived at the ballroom with a box wrapped in silver paper. "For you," he said, holding it out to Amara. She stared at the box, not taking it. "Marcus, I can't accept gifts from you. It's not appropriate." "Amara." He said her name with such gentleness that it made her heart ache. Over the weeks, the way he spoke to her had changed, becoming softer, warmer. "Please, just open it." With trembling fingers, Amara unwrapped the box. Inside was a pair of dance shoes, beautiful and elegant, clearly expensive. They were exactly her size. "You can't keep dancing in your work shoes," Marcus said. "They'll ruin your feet." Amara looked up at him, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with dancing and everything to do with the invisible thread that had been weaving itself tighter between them with each passing day. "Thank you," she whispered. That afternoon, wearing her new shoes, Amara danced with Marcus to a song he'd chosen specifically for her. As he pulled her close for a particularly intricate turn, their eyes met and held. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken words, with feelings neither was ready to name. Marcus's hand at her waist pressed slightly firmer. Amara's fingers tightened around his. They moved in perfect synchronization, their bodies knowing what their minds refused to acknowledge. When the song ended, they stood frozen, mere inches apart, both breathing hard. Marcus's gaze dropped to Amara's lips, and she saw the war playing out behind his eyes. Want versus loyalty to his wife's memory. Desire versus the massive gap in their social positions. Need versus what was appropriate. "Amara," he breathed, her name a question and a prayer. The moment stretched out, fragile and electric. Amara's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She should step back. Should remind him of who she was, who he was, all the reasons this couldn't happen. But she didn't move. The spell broke when Marcus's phone rang, the shrill sound shattering the tension like glass. He stepped back abruptly, pulling the phone from his pocket with shaking hands. "I have to take this," he said, his voice rough. He answered the call and walked out of the ballroom without looking back, leaving Amara standing alone in her new dance shoes, her body trembling and her mind in chaos. That night, lying in her bed, Amara made a decision. Tomorrow, she would tell Marcus they needed to stop. This had gone too far. She was his employee, nothing more, and letting herself feel anything else was not only unprofessional but potentially devastating for her entire family's future. But when tomorrow came and she stood in the ballroom ready to have that difficult conversation, Marcus wasn't there. 2 o'clock came and went. Then 3. Then 4. He didn't show up for their dance session for the first time since this had all begun, and the disappointment that crashed over Amara told her something she'd been denying for weeks. She was already in too deep. 3 days passed with no sign of Marcus. He left the house before dawn and returned after midnight. Amara saw him only once, catching a glimpse of him in the hallway late one night. His tie loosened and exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second before he looked away and disappeared into his study. The ballroom sat empty at 2 o'clock each afternoon, and Amara felt its emptiness like a physical ache. She tried to tell herself it was for the best, that whatever had been building between them needed to stop. But her heart refused to listen to logic. Mrs. Chen noticed Amara's distraction and pulled her aside one morning. "Are you feeling well? You seem troubled." "I'm fine," Amara lied, scrubbing at a spotless counter with unnecessary vigor. "Just tired." The older woman studied her with eyes that saw too much. "Mr. Okonkwo has been working very hard lately. Important merger, I think. He gets like this sometimes, consumed by his business. Don't take it personally." Amara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. How could she explain that it felt deeply personal when she couldn't even explain to herself why it hurt so much? On the 4th day, Amara finally forced herself to enter the ballroom with the intention of truly cleaning it, not just using it as her private sanctuary. She pushed open the heavy door and stopped short. Marcus stood in the center of the room, still wearing his work clothes, his back to her. Music was already playing, something slow and haunting that she didn't recognize. "I'm sorry," he said without turning around. "I've been a coward." Amara's hand tightened on the doorknob. "You don't owe me an explanation. I'm just your housekeeper." "Stop." Marcus spun to face her, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. "Stop pretending that's all you are. Stop pretending these weeks meant nothing. I can't do it anymore." "Marcus, I loved my wife more than life itself," he continued, his voice raw with emotion. "When she died, I thought I died too. I wanted to die. For 2 years, I've been a ghost, going through the motions of living without actually being alive. And then you danced into my life, literally danced into it, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to breathe." Amara felt tears streaming down her face. "This can't happen. You know it can't. I work for you. I'm nobody, and you're Marcus Okonkwo, and the world doesn't work this way. To hell with how the world works." Marcus crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides. He stopped just inches from her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I'm not asking you to understand it. I don't understand it myself. All I know is that when I'm with you, I feel alive again. And when I'm not with you, all I can think about is getting back to you. Your wife would want me to be happy," Marcus said firmly. "Keisha had more love in her heart than anyone I've ever known. She would never want me to spend the rest of my life alone, drowning in grief. She would have kicked my ass for wasting 2 years already." Despite everything, Amara felt a laugh bubble up through her tears. "You're supposed to be the cold, emotionless billionaire. I was. Until a beautiful woman danced her way past every wall I'd built." Marcus reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Dance with me, Amara. Please. Just one more time." She should say no. Should walk out of this room and never come back. Should protect herself and her family from the inevitable disaster that would follow if she let herself fall any further. But as the music swelled and Marcus's hand found her waist, as her body melted into his and they began to move across the floor in perfect harmony, Amara realized it was already too late. She had already fallen. Had probably been falling since that very first dance, when she'd seen past the cold exterior to the wounded, lonely man beneath. They danced for hours that afternoon, barely speaking, letting their bodies say what words couldn't. There was a desperation to their movements now, an acknowledgement that they were standing on the edge of something that would change both their lives forever. As the sun began to set, painting the ballroom in shades of gold and amber, Marcus pulled Amara close for one final slow dance. His cheek rested against her temple, and she could feel his heartbeat thundering against her chest. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. "I don't know how to let myself feel again without being terrified I'll lose it all." "I'm scared too," Amara admitted. "Of losing my job, of hurting my family, of wanting something I have no right to want. What if I told you that you have every right? That what you want matters just as much as what anyone else wants?" Before Amara could respond, The ballroom door burst open. Mrs. Chun stood in the doorway, her face pale with shock. Behind her, Thomas and Martin crowded in, their eyes wide. Amara and Marcus sprang apart, but it was too late. The damage was done. "Mr. Okonkwo," Mrs. Chun said, her voice shaking slightly. "I apologize for the intrusion. We heard music and were concerned. We didn't know we didn't know." The spell of the afternoon shattered. Reality came crashing back with brutal force. Amara saw the situation through the staff's eyes, their employer dancing intimately with the maid, clearly more than just a professional relationship. The gossip would spread like wildfire. Her reputation would be destroyed. "Everyone out," Marcus commanded, his voice sharp with authority. "Now." The staff scattered, but Amara caught the look Mrs. Chin shot her before leaving. It was a mixture of disappointment, shock, and something that might have been pity. When the door closed, silence filled the ballroom like a suffocating blanket. "I'll pack my things," Amara said, her voice hollow. "I'll be gone by morning." "No." Marcus grabbed her hand as she tried to walk past him. "You're not going anywhere." "Marcus, they saw us. By tomorrow, everyone will know. My reputation, your reputation. I don't care about reputation. I care about you." The raw honesty in his voice made Amara's knees weak. "You should care. You have a business to run, a legacy to protect. I'm just—" "You're everything," Marcus interrupted fiercely. "And I'm done pretending you're not." He pulled her back into his arms, and before Amara could process what was happening, his lips found hers. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, giving her the chance to pull away. But when she didn't, when instead she rose on her toes and kissed him back with all the emotion she'd been suppressing for weeks, it deepened into something that felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "Sit. Please stay." Amara knew she should refuse. Knew that staying meant walking into a storm that would test both of them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But looking into Marcus's eyes, seeing the hope and vulnerability there, she found herself nodding. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." Neither of them knew that their decision had already set in motion a chain of events that would threaten not just their relationship, but Marcus's entire empire and both their futures. Now, before we continue with this incredible story, I want to ask you all something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love knowing that this story is reaching people all around the world. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next, because trust me, things are about to get even more intense. The morning after the kiss, Amara woke with her stomach in knots. She'd barely slept, tossing and turning as she replayed the moment the staff had discovered her and Marcus dancing. She replayed the kiss even more, the way it had felt like the world stopped spinning and started again in a completely different direction. When she emerged from her room, she found the kitchen unusually quiet. Thomas was at the stove preparing breakfast, but his normally cheerful humming was absent. He glanced at her when she entered, his expression neutral but his eyes cautious. "Morning," Amara said, trying to sound normal. "Morning." Thomas returned his attention to the eggs he was scrambling. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Mrs. Chin entered through the side door, her arms full of fresh linens. She nodded curtly at Amara but didn't speak, moving past her toward the laundry room with unusual haste. The message was clear. The staff knew something had happened, and they were keeping their distance, unsure how to treat her now that the boundaries had been crossed. Amara felt sick. These people had become her colleagues, almost friends in the months she'd worked here. Now she was an outsider, someone who had broken an unspoken rule by getting involved with the boss. She threw herself into her work, cleaning with a fervor born of anxiety and guilt. Every time she passed someone in the hallway, she felt their eyes on her, felt the weight of their judgment or curiosity or both. Marcus had left for work before sunrise, as usual. Amara wondered if he was already regretting last night, if the cold light of day had reminded him of all the reasons they were impossible. At 2 o'clock, she found herself standing outside the ballroom, her hand on the doorknob, paralyzed with indecision. Should she go in? Would Marcus even be there? The decision was made for her when the door opened from the inside. Marcus stood there, still in his work clothes, his expression unreadable. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure either." Amara's voice came out barely above a whisper. Marcus stepped aside to let her in, then closed the door behind her. The ballroom felt different today, charged with tension and unspoken questions. "The staff is treating me like I have the plague," Amara said, wrapping her arms around herself. "I know. Mrs. Chun came to my office this morning." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, messing up its usual perfect styling. She was very professional, very diplomatic. She said she felt it was her duty to express concern about the situation and the potential complications it might cause for the household. She's not wrong. Maybe not. But it doesn't change how I feel. Marcus crossed to where Amara stood. "I've spent the whole day trying to convince myself this is a mistake. That I should let you go, give you a glowing reference, and go back to being the cold, detached man I was before you came here." Amara's heart sank. "That's probably the smart thing to do." "Probably. But I've never been in love before, Amara. Even with Keisha, as much as I loved her, it was different. We grew into love over time, built it slowly and carefully. What I feel for you, it's like being struck by lightning. It's terrifying and exhilarating, and I can't make it stop no matter how much logic tells me I should." Amara's breath caught. "You love me?" "I love you," Marcus confirmed, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "I know it's too soon, I know it's complicated, I know there are 1,000 reasons why I shouldn't. But I do." Tears spilled down Amara's cheeks before she could stop them. "I love you too. And it terrifies me because I have so much to lose. My family depends on this job, on the money I send home. If this falls apart, if people find out and it becomes a scandal, I won't just lose you. I'll lose everything." Marcus closed the distance between them and took her hands in his. "Then we'll be careful. We'll keep this between us until we figure out how to do this right. No more dancing where staff might see us. We'll be professional when others are around." "Can we do that? Can we really hide something this big?" "We have to try," Marcus said. "Because the alternative, losing you before we've even had a chance to see where this goes, that's not an option I'm willing to accept." He pulled her into his arms, and Amara melted into his embrace, letting herself feel safe for just a moment. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the empty ballroom where everything had started. Over the following weeks, they developed a careful routine. During the day, they maintained strict professionalism. Amara performed her duties, Marcus went to work, and when they passed each other in the mansion, they barely made eye contact. To anyone watching, they were employer and employee, nothing more. But every night after the staff had retired to their rooms and the mansion fell quiet, Marcus would send Amara a text with a single word: library. The library was on the second floor, far from the staff quarters, with thick walls and a door that locked. It became their sanctuary. Marcus would light the fireplace, and they would spend hours talking, sharing stories about their days, their pasts, their dreams for the future. Sometimes they would dance, moving slowly to music played so quietly it was barely audible, both hyper-aware of the need for silence. Other times they would simply sit together on the leather couch, Amara reading aloud from the books that lined the walls while Marcus listened with his eyes closed, his hand holding hers. They talked about everything. Marcus shared more about his childhood in Lagos before his family immigrated to the United States when he was 10. He described the culture shock, the struggle to fit in, the drive that had pushed him to build his tech empire from nothing. He talked about the pressure he felt to honor his parents' sacrifices, to prove that their leap of faith in coming to America had been worth it. Amara told him about growing up between two worlds, her grandmother's traditional Nigerian values and her mother's attempts to embrace American culture. She shared her fears about her mother's health, her guilt over leaving Atlanta, her hopes that Jamal would have opportunities she'd never had. "You're so strong," Marcus said one night as they lay on the library floor, staring up at the coffered ceiling. "Carrying your whole family on your shoulders and never complaining." "I complain plenty," Amara countered with a small smile. "You just make me feel like I don't have to carry everything alone." Marcus turned to face her, propping himself up on one elbow. You don't. Whatever happens, however this plays out, I'm here. Your family's burdens are my burdens now. Marcus, I can't let you. It's not about letting me. It's about what partners do for each other. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. I've already set up an account to cover your mother's medical expenses. Don't argue, he added when she opened her mouth to protest. It's done. And before you tell me it's too much, remember that I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. Let me do this. Let me take care of the people you love. Amara felt overwhelmed by the generosity, by the way Marcus saw her struggles and simply acted to relieve them. How did I get so lucky to find you? Lucky? Amara, I'm the lucky one. You brought me back to life. They kissed then, slow and deep, the outside world fading away until only the two of them existed in that moment. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves, no matter how carefully they're kept. It started small. Martin, the driver, mentioned to Thomas that Mr. Okonkwo's car was often still in the garage very late at night, even though his bedroom lights were off. Thomas, in turn, commented to Mrs. Chen that he'd noticed food missing from the kitchen in the mornings. Not much, but enough to suggest someone was snacking late at night. Mrs. Chen, who had been in service long enough to recognize the signs of a clandestine affair, began paying closer attention. She noticed the way Amara's face would light up when Marcus entered a room, even though the young woman quickly schooled her expression. She observed the way Marcus's eyes would follow Amara when he thought no one was looking. And then, one evening, Mrs. Chen needed to retrieve fresh towels from the second-floor linen closet. As she climbed the stairs, she heard soft music coming from the library. The door was closed, but through the crack at the bottom, she could see the flickering light of the fireplace. She stood there for a long moment, debating what to do. Then she heard it, Amara's laugh, light and joyful, followed by Marcus's deeper chuckle. The sound of two people happy together, unguarded in a way she'd never heard from either of them. Mrs. Chen quietly retreated downstairs without the towels. That night, lying in her bed, she made a decision. She would protect them. She would keep their secret, at least for now, because in her 20 years of service to various wealthy families, she'd rarely seen genuine love. And what was growing between Marcus Okonkwo and Amara was undeniably real. 2 months into their secret relationship, Marcus had to attend a charity gala hosted by his company. It was one of the biggest social events of the Chicago season, and his presence was mandatory. "Come with me," he said to Amara one night in the library. "To the gala? Marcus, I can't. Everyone would talk. Not as my date. As staff. The event needs extra servers, and the catering company is shorthanded. Mrs. Chin is coordinating it. I'll make sure you're assigned to work it." Amara frowned. "Why would you want me to work at your event?" "Because I'll be surrounded by hundreds of people, all of them fake and superficial, and the only real person in that room will be you. I need to be able to look across the crowd and see your face, even if I can't talk to you." "That sounds like torture for both of us." "Maybe, but it's better than being there without you at all." Against her better judgment, Amara agreed. The night of the gala, she put on the black and white uniform provided to the catering staff and pulled her hair back into a neat bun. Looking at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the sophisticated woman staring back at her. The uniform was elegant, professional, making her look like she belonged in the glittering world Marcus inhabited. The gala was held at the Peninsula Hotel downtown, in a ballroom that made even Marcus's mansion look modest. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and everywhere Amara looked, she saw designer gowns, expensive jewelry, and the kind of casual wealth that came from generations of money. She circulated through the crowd with a tray of champagne, invisible to the guests the way service staff always were. She caught glimpses of Marcus throughout the evening, always surrounded by people, his public mask firmly in place. He was charming when necessary, authoritative when required, the perfect image of a successful CEO. But every so often, his eyes would find her across the room, and for just a second, the mask would slip. He would smile, a real smile just for her, before turning back to his conversation. "More champagne?" Amara offered to a group of elegantly dressed women. "Thank you, dear," one of them said absently, taking a glass without really looking at Amara. Did you see Marcus Okonkwo tonight? He's looking better than he has in years. Really? Another woman replied. I heard he's been impossible to work with since his wife died. Cold as ice. Not tonight. I actually saw him smile. Maybe he's finally moving on. I hope so. Such a waste for a man like that to be alone. And all that money just sitting there. If he started dating again, every single woman in Chicago would throw herself at him. The women laughed, and Amara moved away before they could see the emotion on her face. Jealousy, she realized with surprise. She was jealous of hypothetical women who might pursue Marcus, even though she had no claim to him beyond their secret relationship. As the evening wore on, Amara noticed a woman in a stunning red gown making a determined path toward Marcus. She was beautiful in an intimidating way, tall, confident, with the kind of poise that came from growing up in high society. Marcus? The woman purred, touching his arm familiarly. It's been too long. Victoria, Marcus replied politely, but Amara could see the tension in his shoulders. How have you been? Lonely, Victoria said, moving closer. We should catch up properly. Dinner this week. Amara couldn't hear Marcus's response, but whatever he said made Victoria pout prettily. The woman leaned in, whispering something in his ear that made him stiffen. Unable to watch anymore, Amara retreated to the service area. She told herself she was being ridiculous, that she had no right to feel possessive, that this was exactly why their relationship was impossible. They lived in different worlds, and moments like this proved it. She was refilling her tray when she felt someone behind her. She turned to find Marcus standing there, his expression intense. What are you doing back here? She whispered urgently. Someone might see. I don't care. I saw your face when Victoria was talking to me. You looked hurt. I wasn't. Don't lie to me, Amara. I know you better than that. She sighed, setting down the tray. Fine. I was jealous. Happy? I was jealous of a woman who actually belongs in your world, who could stand next to you at events like this without anyone thinking twice about it. Marcus moved closer, backing her into the shadows of the service corridor. Victoria Wellington is the daughter of one of my investors. She's been throwing herself at me since Keisha died, and I have zero interest. The only woman I want is standing right in front of me. Marcus, we're at your company gala. You can't. He kissed her, hard and desperate, cutting off her protests. When he pulled back, his eyes were fierce. I'm tired of hiding. Tired of pretending you don't mean everything to me. We agreed to be careful. I know, and I'm trying. But seeing you tonight, watching you move through that crowd where no one sees how extraordinary you are, it's killing me. I want to announce to everyone in that ballroom that you're mine. You can't, Amara said, even as her heart soared at his words. Not yet. Please, Marcus. We need more time. He rested his forehead against hers, breathing hard. How much more time? I don't know. But please, let's just get through tonight. Marcus nodded reluctantly and stepped back. You're right. I'm sorry. I'll go back out there, play my part. But Amara? He waited until she met his eyes. This isn't sustainable. Eventually, something's got to give. He walked away, leaving Amara alone in the shadows, her heart racing and a sense of impending doom settling in her stomach. Because Marcus was right. They couldn't keep living in this limbo forever. Soon, very soon, they would have to make a choice. And whatever they chose would change everything. The night after the gala, Marcus paced the library like a caged tiger while Amara watched from the couch, her heart heavy with the weight of unspoken words. We need to talk about the future, Marcus finally said, stopping in front of the fireplace. Real talk, not just pretending we can keep this up indefinitely. I know, Amara replied quietly. Marcus turned to face her. I want you to move out of the staff quarters. Into the main part of the house. Into my wing. Marcus, that would make it obvious to everyone. I don't care anymore. I'm tired of sneaking around in my own house. Tired of acting like what we have is something to be ashamed of. Amara stood, crossing to him. I'm not ashamed. But there are realities we can't ignore. Your board of directors, your investors, your family, What will they think when they find out you're involved with your housekeeper? They'll think I'm human. That I deserve happiness just like anyone else. Will they? Or will they think I'm taking advantage of you? That I'm some gold digger who seduced her way into your bed and your bank account? The words hung in the air, ugly and raw. Marcus's jaw tightened. Anyone who knows you would never think that. But they don't know me. They'll see the maid who got involved with the billionaire boss, and they'll make assumptions. It's what people do. Amara's voice cracked. I've worked so hard my whole life to be seen as more than just the help, to prove I'm smart and capable and worthy of respect. If this comes out the wrong way, all of that disappears. I become a stereotype, a cautionary tale. Marcus pulled her into his arms. I won't let that happen. I'll make sure everyone knows you're not with me for my money. That you're brilliant and kind and the strongest person I've ever met. You can't control what people think. Maybe not. But I can control how we tell our story. Marcus pulled back to look at her. What if we do this properly? Let me court you publicly. Take you on actual dates, introduce you to my friends and colleagues as someone I'm seeing, not as my employee. Give people time to get to know you as I know you. While I'm still working for you. Marcus, that makes it worse, not better. Then quit. I'll match your salary, help you find another job if you want one. Or don't work at all. Focus on your family, on yourself, on the things you've always wanted to do but couldn't because you were too busy taking care of everyone else. Amara shook her head. I can't be dependent on you like that. What if this doesn't work out? What if 6 months from now you realize this was just a rebound from losing your wife, and I'm left with no job, no income, and no way to support my family? That won't happen. You can't promise that. Nobody can promise that. They stood in silence, the weight of their impossible situation crushing down on them. Marcus looked defeated in a way Amara had never seen before, and it broke her heart. So what do you want to do? He asked finally. Keep hiding forever? Pretend we're not in love until we're both old and gray? I don't know, Amara whispered. I just know I'm scared. I'm scared too. Marcus cupped her face in his hands. But I'm more scared of losing you than I am of what anyone else thinks. Before Amara could respond, her phone buzzed. She pulled it out of her pocket, and her face went pale as she read the message. What is it? Marcus asked, alarm in his voice. It's Jamal. He's been in an accident. The next 24 hours passed in a blur. Marcus immediately arranged for his private jet to take them to Atlanta. During the flight, Amara sat rigid with worry, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. Marcus held her, murmuring reassurances he didn't quite believe himself. At the hospital, they found Jamal conscious but battered. He'd been hit by a car while riding his bike to campus. Broken leg, fractured ribs, concussion. He would recover, the doctors said, but it would take time. Amara's mother, weak but mobile with her walker, clutched Amara's hand with tears streaming down her face. Thank God you're here, baby. I didn't know what to do. It's okay, Mama. I'm here now. Amara turned to Marcus, who had stayed respectfully in the background. Mom, Jamal, this is Marcus Okonkwo. He's my employer. He helped me get here quickly. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but she didn't know how else to explain Marcus's presence without revealing everything. Thank you, sir, Jamal said groggily from his hospital bed. That was really kind of you. Marcus moved closer, his expression gentle. I'm just glad Amara could be here for you. You focus on healing. Everything else will be taken care of. Over the next 3 days, as Amara stayed by her brother's bedside, Marcus proved exactly what he meant. He arranged for the best specialists to review Jamal's case. He had medical equipment delivered to her mother's apartment for when Jamal was discharged. He paid for everything without fanfare, without expecting praise or gratitude, simply doing what needed to be done. Amara's mother, despite her illness, noticed everything. On the third night, after Jamal had fallen asleep and Amara was preparing to head to a nearby hotel where Marcus had gotten them rooms, her mother pulled her aside. That man is in love with you, she said simply. Amara froze. Mama. Don't lie to your mother, baby. I can see it in the way he looks at you. And you love him too. Her mother studied her face. He's your employer. That's complicated. That's one word for it, Amara said, sinking into a chair. Her mother sat beside her with some difficulty. Your grandmother, my mother, used to say that love doesn't care about convenience. It shows up when it wants to, where it wants to, and we can either embrace it or run from it. But running never works. It's not that simple. There are so many complications. Life is nothing but complications, Amara. The question is whether this man is worth navigating them for. Her mother took her hand. I've watched you these past 3 days. When he's in the room, you breathe differently. You relax, like you don't have to carry the world alone anymore. I haven't seen you that way since you were a little girl, before your father left, before you decided you had to be strong for everyone all the time. Tears spilled down Amara's cheeks. I'm scared, Mama. Of course you are. Real love is terrifying. But you know what's worse? Living half a life because you're too afraid to reach for a whole one. That night, when Marcus walked Amara to her hotel room door, she turned to him with tears still shining in her eyes. Thank you. For everything you've done for my family. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. Because you didn't just throw money at the problem. You stayed. You sat with me in that hospital room. You talked to Jamal about his engineering classes and made him laugh even though he was in pain. You helped my mother into her chair and didn't treat her like she was broken. Amara's voice shook. You saw my family, really saw them, and you cared. Marcus brushed a tear from her cheek. Of course I cared. They're part of you. How could I not love them? My mother knows. About us. I figured she might. She's perceptive. She said love doesn't care about convenience. Your mother is a wise woman. Marcus smiled softly. What do you think? I think. Amara took a deep breath. I think I'm tired of being scared. I think I'm tired of hiding. And I think when we get back to Chicago, we need to figure out how to do this for real. Marcus's eyes lit up with hope. You mean it? I mean it. No more sneaking around. No more pretending. We'll do this the right way, whatever that looks like. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, a promise of everything they could be if they just had the courage to try. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling despite the exhaustion and stress of the past few days. I love you, Amara. I love you too, Marcus. They flew back to Chicago 2 days later, after Jamal had been discharged and settled in his apartment with a home health aide Marcus had arranged. On the plane, they held hands openly for the first time, no longer caring about keeping up appearances. So how do we do this? Amara asked. What's the plan? I've been thinking about that. First, you resign from your position as housekeeper. I'll give you severance, references, whatever you need. Then, after a respectable period, say a month or 2, I ask you on a proper date. We start being seen together publicly. And when people inevitably dig into my background and find out I used to work for you, we tell the truth. That we fell in love, that it was unexpected and complicated, but that we handled it as ethically as possible by making sure you were no longer my employee before we pursued a relationship. Marcus squeezed her hand. It's not perfect, but it's honest. Your board of directors might not see it that way. Then I'll deal with them. Amara, I own 60% of my company. They can't force me out. And even if they could, I wouldn't care. You're more important than any business deal. Amara leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling simultaneously relieved and terrified about what came next. When this gets out, it's going to be a circus. Probably. But we'll face it together. When they landed in Chicago, Marcus drove them straight to the mansion. As they pulled into the driveway, Amara saw Mrs. Chen waiting at the entrance, her expression unreadable. I should talk to her first, Amara said, before we make any official decisions. Marcus nodded. I'll be in my study when you're ready. Amara found Mrs. Chen in the kitchen, preparing tea. The older woman looked up as she entered, her face carefully neutral. How is your brother? Mrs. Chen asked. He'll be okay. Thank you for asking. Good. I'm glad. Mrs. Chen poured 2 cups of tea and gestured for Amara to sit. You know, in my 20 years of working for wealthy families, I've seen many things. Some good, some bad. But I've never seen what I saw between you and Mr. Okonkwo. Amara's heart raced. Mrs. Chen. Let me finish. I've seen affairs, girls trying to trap rich men, men taking advantage of vulnerable employees. That's not what this is. What you and Mr. Okonkwo have is real. I've known him since before his wife died. I watched him turn into a shell of himself after she was gone. And then you came, and slowly, piece by piece, he became human again. Tears pricked at Amara's eyes. I never meant for this to happen. I never meant to complicate things. Love is always complicated. The question is what you plan to do about it. I'm going to resign. It's not appropriate for me to continue working here while we're together. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. That's wise. And for what it's worth, I think you're good for him. You make him remember how to be happy. Don't let anyone make you feel like that's wrong. Thank you, Amara whispered. That means more than you know. That evening, Amara officially submitted her resignation to Marcus, who accepted it with a mixture of relief and sadness. The next day, she began packing her belongings from the staff quarters, preparing to move out. The other staff members reacted with varying degrees of surprise and understanding. Thomas gave her a warm hug and made her promise to visit. Martin wished her well with genuine kindness. Even David, the taciturn security guard, offered her a nod of respect as she left. Marcus had offered to get her an apartment, but Amara insisted on finding her own place, something she could afford with her savings. It was important to her to maintain some independence, to prove to herself and to the world that she wasn't with Marcus for his money. She found a modest studio in a decent neighborhood and moved in with the few possessions she'd accumulated during her time in Chicago. For the first few nights, the silence felt overwhelming after months of living in the bustling mansion. But Marcus visited her every evening, bringing takeout and stories from his day. They would sit on her second-hand couch and talk for hours, finally able to be together without fear of being discovered. This is nice, Marcus said one evening, looking around her small apartment. Intimate. It's tiny, Amara corrected with a laugh. It's yours. That makes it perfect. 6 weeks after she'd resigned, Marcus asked Amara on their first official public date. He took her to an upscale restaurant downtown, made reservations under both their names, and arrived to pick her up with flowers like a nervous teenager. Amara wore a dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion. Nothing too expensive, but elegant and beautiful. When Marcus saw her, his eyes widened with unmistakable appreciation. You're stunning, he breathed. You clean up pretty well yourself, she replied, taking in his perfectly tailored suit. At the restaurant, they held hands across the table, talking and laughing without the weight of secrecy bearing down on them. Other diners noticed. It was impossible not to notice Marcus Okonkwo, one of Chicago's most eligible bachelors, dining with a beautiful woman who clearly had his complete attention. By the next morning, their photo was on 2 society blogs, accompanied by speculation about Marcus's mysterious new girlfriend. The circus, as Amara had predicted, had begun. The morning after their public debut, Amara's phone started ringing before she was even fully awake. Unknown numbers, one after another, each one a journalist or blogger looking for a comment about her relationship with Marcus Okonkwo. She ignored them all, but the calls kept coming. By noon, her voicemail was full, and she'd received dozens of text messages from numbers she didn't recognize. Some were innocuous requests for interviews, but others were more aggressive, demanding to know who she was and what her intentions were toward Marcus. Marcus called around 2 o'clock, his voice tight with anger. Have you seen the articles? I've been avoiding them, Amara admitted, curled up on her couch with her phone face down on the coffee table. Smart. Don't look. My PR team is handling it. But curiosity got the better of her. After hanging up with Marcus, Amara opened her laptop and searched her own name. What she found made her stomach turn. The headlines were brutal. Billionaire's new flame, from Maid to main squeeze. Marcus Okonkwo's downgrade. Tech mogul dating former employee. Gold digger or true love? Inside the scandalous romance that has Chicago talking. The articles were worse. They detailed her employment history, her family's financial struggles, even found photos of her modest apartment building and speculated about whether Marcus was supporting her. Some painted her as a calculating seductress who had targeted a grieving widower. Others portrayed her as a victim being taken advantage of by a powerful man. None of them saw her as simply a woman in love. The worst part was the comment sections. Thousands of strangers felt entitled to share their opinions about her character, her appearance, her worth. Some defended her, but many more were cruel beyond imagination. Amara slammed the laptop shut, her hands shaking. She'd known this would be difficult, but she hadn't anticipated the sheer viciousness of public scrutiny. Her phone rang again. This time it was her mother. "Baby, are you okay? Someone from a newspaper called me asking about you and Marcus." "I'm fine, Mama. Don't talk to anyone. And tell Jamal not to either." "Amara, what's going on? These people are saying terrible things." "It's just gossip. It'll die down eventually." Amara tried to keep her voice steady, but she could hear it shaking. "Come home to Atlanta. Get away from all this craziness for a while." "I can't run, Mama. That'll just make it worse." After she hung up, Amara allowed herself 5 minutes to cry. Then she dried her tears, took a deep breath, and decided that if the world was going to judge her anyway, she might as well live her life on her own terms. That evening, Marcus arrived at her apartment looking exhausted and furious. "My PR team wants to release a statement. Something about respecting our privacy during this exciting new chapter or some corporate nonsense like that. Will it help? It might calm things down a bit. But Amara, I need you to know, my board called an emergency meeting. They're concerned about the optics of our relationship. Some of the more conservative investors are threatening to pull out if I don't handle this properly." Amara felt cold. "Handle this? You mean handle me?" "They want me to distance myself from you publicly. Say it was just a brief fling, nothing serious." "And what did you tell them?" Marcus took her hands, his grip firm and reassuring. "I told them to go to hell. I told them that you're not going anywhere, that I love you, and that any investor who has a problem with that can take their money elsewhere." "Marcus, you could lose everything. I could lose my company. That's not the same as everything. Everything is standing right in front of me, and I'm not giving that up for anyone." Despite her fear, Amara felt warmth spread through her chest. "You really told your board to go to hell?" "In slightly more professional terms, but yes. I've spent 2 years letting them dictate every aspect of my life in the name of protecting the company's image. I'm done with that. The company exists to serve me, not the other way around." "What if they force you out?" "They can't. I have controlling interest. The worst they can do is make things difficult for a while. But eventually, either they'll accept us, or I'll buy out the dissenters and find new investors." Marcus cupped her face in his hands. "I meant what I said. You're more important than any business deal." They ordered Chinese food and spent the evening deliberately not looking at social media or news sites. Instead, they watched old movies and pretended the outside world didn't exist. But the outside world had other plans. The next morning, a knock on Amara's door startled her awake. She opened it to find a well-dressed woman in her 50s holding a designer handbag and wearing an expression of barely concealed disgust. "You must be Amara," the woman said, her tone dripping with condescension. "I'm Eleanor Okonkwo, Marcus's mother." Amara's blood ran cold. Marcus had mentioned his mother lived in New York and that they had a complicated relationship, but he'd never said she was planning to visit. "Monsieur, please come in." Amara stepped aside, suddenly hyper-aware of her small apartment, her second-hand furniture, her bargain store clothes. Eleanor walked in with the air of someone inspecting a crime scene. Her eyes swept over the space, taking in every detail with a critical gaze that made Amara want to shrink into the floor. "So this is where my son has been spending his evenings," Eleanor said, settling onto the couch without being invited. "How quaint. Can I get you some coffee or tea?" "No, thank you. This won't take long." Eleanor fixed Amara with a steely stare. "I'm going to be direct, miss." She trailed off, realizing she didn't know Amara's last name. "Williams. Amara Williams. Miss Williams. I've seen the articles about you and my son. I've done my research. You're a housekeeper, or were until very recently. Your family has significant financial difficulties. You have no college education, no connections, nothing that would make you suitable for someone of Marcus's stature. Each word landed like a physical blow, but Amara forced herself to stand tall. With respect, Mrs. Okonkwo, who I am has nothing to do with my bank account or my resume. Doesn't it? Tell me, what exactly do you bring to this relationship? What could you possibly offer my son that he couldn't find with any number of successful, educated, appropriate women? I love him, Amara said simply. And he loves me. Eleanor laughed, the sound cold and brittle. How naive. Do you have any idea what you're doing to his reputation? To his business? His board is in chaos, investors are nervous, and all because he's decided to have a midlife crisis with the help. I'm not a crisis. I'm a person. You're an embarrassment. And if you truly loved my son, you'd see that and remove yourself from his life before you cause any more damage. I'm not going anywhere, Amara said, her voice stronger than she felt. Then you're more selfish than I thought. Eleanor stood, smoothing her expensive skirt. Marcus has worked his entire life to build his empire, to make his father and me proud, to prove that our sacrifice in coming to this country was worth it. And you're willing to watch it all crumble because you think you love him. It's not going to crumble. And our love isn't something I think, it's something I know. Eleanor moved toward the door, then paused. My husband and I came to America with nothing. We worked 3 jobs each, lived in a 1-bedroom apartment smaller than this one, saved every penny so Marcus could have opportunities we never had. Do you understand that kind of sacrifice? That kind of pressure? I understand sacrifice, Amara said quietly. I've been supporting my family since I was 18. I've worked jobs I hated, lived in places I could barely afford, gone without so my brother could go to college and my mother could see doctors. So yes, Mrs. Okonkwo, I understand sacrifice. For the first time, Eleanor's expression flickered with something other than contempt. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by cold determination. Then you should understand that sometimes love means letting go. If you care about Marcus at all, you'll walk away before you destroy everything he's built. After Eleanor left, Amara sank onto the couch, her entire body shaking. The older woman's words echoed in her head, each one a poison dart designed to hit exactly where she was most vulnerable. Was she being selfish? Was she really hurting Marcus by staying? She was still sitting there an hour later when Marcus arrived, taking one look at her face and immediately kneeling in front of her. What happened? Are you okay? Your mother was here. Marcus's jaw tightened. She came to Chicago? She didn't tell me, of course she didn't. He took Amara's hands. What did she say to you? That I'm ruining your life. That I'm an embarrassment. That if I really loved you I'd leave. Amara's voice broke. Marcus, what if she's right? She's not right. She's never been right about anything that actually matters. Marcus sat beside her, pulling her against his chest. My mother has very specific ideas about success, about what my life should look like. She wanted me to marry someone from a prominent family, someone who could advance my career and give her grandchildren she could show off at country club events. She never understood that I married Keisha for love, and she doesn't understand this either. She said I bring nothing to this relationship. She's wrong. You bring joy. You bring laughter. You bring light into spaces that have been dark for too long. You make me want to be better, not just for business, but as a human being. Marcus tilted her face up to meet his eyes. My mother's approval isn't worth losing you. Nothing is. But your business will survive or it won't. And if it doesn't, I'll build something new. I did it once, I can do it again. But I can't rebuild my heart if I let you go. I tried living without love after Keisha died, and it nearly destroyed me. I won't go back to that darkness, not for my mother, not for my board, not for anyone. Amara leaned into him, drawing strength from his certainty. This is so much harder than I thought it would be. I know. And I'm sorry. I wish I could protect you from all of this. You can't protect me from the world. But you can stand beside me while I face it. That's enough. Over the next week, the media storm intensified before finally beginning to die down. Marcus's PR team released a carefully worded statement confirming that he and Amara were in a committed relationship and asking for privacy. Some outlets respected the request, others continued to speculate wildly. But slowly, public opinion began to shift. A few influential bloggers wrote pieces defending their relationship, pointing out the hypocrisy of celebrating Marcus's wealth and success while condemning Amara for not having the same advantages. An interview with one of Marcus's college friends went viral, where the friend described how empty Marcus had been after Keisha's death and how transformed he seemed now. "People are starting to see us as a real couple, not just a scandal," Amara said one evening, scrolling through more positive articles on her laptop. "Does that make it easier?" Marcus asked from the kitchen, where he was attempting to make dinner, a new hobby he'd taken up now that he spent most evenings at her apartment. "A little. At least now when people stare at me in public, some of them look curious instead of judgmental." Marcus brought over 2 plates of pasta that looked surprisingly edible. "I've been thinking. The board meeting is next week. They're going to push me again to either end things with you or step down as CEO." Amara's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Step down? Marcus, you can't." "Technically I can. I'd still own my shares, still be the majority shareholder. I just wouldn't be involved in day-to-day operations." He set down his fork. "What if I did it?" "What?" "What if I stepped down as CEO? Appointed someone else to run the company while I focused on other things. On us. On actually living instead of just working." "Marcus, that company is your life's work. I won't let you give that up for me. You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing this. I've been CEO for 12 years. I've built the company into something successful and stable. Maybe it's time to let someone else take the reins while I figure out what comes next." He reached across the small table to take her hand. "I've been thinking about what Keisha used to say, about how life is too short to spend it all in boardrooms and on conference calls. She wanted us to travel, to have adventures, to do something meaningful beyond just making money. I never listened. I was always too busy, always had one more deal to close. And then she was gone, and I never got the chance to give her those experiences." "So this is about Keisha?" Amara asked carefully. "No. It's about not making the same mistake twice. It's about choosing life over work, love over legacy. I've proven I can build a successful company. Now I want to prove I can build a successful life." Amara felt tears welling up. "What would you do? If you stepped down?" "I've been thinking about that too. There are so many things I've always wanted to do but never had time for. I could invest in startups, mentor young entrepreneurs, work with nonprofits. Maybe even start a foundation in Keisha's name, focusing on arts education for underprivileged kids, something she would have loved." He squeezed her hand. "And I could spend time with you without constantly being pulled away by work emergencies. We could travel, see the world together. Figure out what our life looks like when we're not constantly fighting against external pressures." "That sounds wonderful," Amara admitted. "But I don't want you to resent me later. What if you wake up one day and realize you miss being CEO? That you gave up too much? Then I'll deal with those feelings when they come. But Amara, I'm not giving up everything. I'm just redistributing my priorities. And right now, you're my priority." The board meeting the following week was, by all accounts, explosive. Marcus told Amara about it that evening, his tie loosened and his hair disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly. "I told them I was stepping down as so," he said, pouring himself a generous glass of whiskey. "You should have seen their faces. Half of them looked relieved. The other half looked like I'd announced I was burning the building down." "What did they say?" "The usual. That I was making a mistake, that I was letting emotion cloud my judgment, that the company needed my leadership. But I held firm. I recommended James Chen as my replacement. He's been COO for 5 years and knows the business inside and out. The board approved it unanimously." "How do you feel?" Marcus took a long sip of his drink, considering. "Lighter. Excited. All of it at once. I've been Marcus Okonkwo, CEO, for so long that I'm not entirely sure who Marcus Okonkwo, just Marcus, actually is." "We'll figure it out together," Amara said, moving to sit beside him. And for what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. Or incredibly stupid. Sometimes those are the same thing. He laughed, the sound genuine and warm. I called my mother after the meeting. Told her what I'd done. I'm guessing she wasn't supportive? She hung up on me. But honestly, that's her loss. I spent too many years trying to live up to her expectations, trying to be the son she wanted instead of the man I am. I'm done with that. Over the next month, as Marcus transitioned out of his CEO role, something remarkable happened. The constant stress that had lined his face began to fade. He smiled more easily, laughed more freely. He started taking Amara on actual dates, not just dinner at expensive restaurants, but simple things like walks along the lakefront, visits to museums, even a Cubs game where they ate hot dogs and cheered loudly with the crowd. They also started making plans for the future. Marcus began working on establishing the Okonkwo Foundation, dedicated to providing arts education and resources to underserved communities. Amara, inspired by his passion, started taking online business courses, thinking about what she might want to do long-term. I've always loved organizing things, managing details, she told Marcus one evening as they reviewed her coursework. Maybe event planning? Or nonprofit management? Something where I can use those skills. You'd be incredible at either of those, Marcus said encouragingly. You've been managing your family's complex needs for years. That takes serious organizational skills. Not everything was perfect. Eleanor continued to refuse Marcus's calls, and several of his old business associates stopped inviting him to their exclusive events. Some of his friends from before couldn't understand why he'd stepped down from such a prestigious position. But Marcus seemed genuinely unbothered by these losses. The people who matter stick around, he told Amara. Everyone else is just noise. 3 months after their relationship became public, Marcus took Amara to meet his father. Unlike Eleanor, Marcus's father Samuel had stayed out of the drama, choosing to form his own opinion rather than rely on gossip and assumptions. Samuel Okonkwo lived in a modest home in Evanston, a stark contrast to the mansion Marcus owned. He was a retired engineer with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor that reminded Amara of her own father before he'd left. "So you're the young woman who's turned my son's world upside down," Samuel said with a warm smile as he welcomed them inside. "I prefer to think I helped him turn it right side up," Amara replied, surprised by her own boldness. Samuel laughed, a deep, rich sound. "I like her already. Tell me about yourself." Over tea and his homemade chin-chin, a Nigerian snack that made Amara tear up with nostalgia for her grandmother, Samuel asked Amara about her life, her family, her dreams. He didn't judge her background or question her motives. He simply listened, genuinely interested in who she was as a person. "Your mother called me," Samuel told Marcus later, while Amara was in the bathroom. "She thinks I should talk sense into you." "And will you?" "Why would I? You're happier than I've seen you in years. You're actually living instead of just existing." Samuel paused. "Your mother and I came to this country because we wanted you to have choices, to build a life on your own terms. Seems to me that's exactly what you're doing." When they left that evening, Amara felt like she'd gained an ally, maybe even a friend. "Your father is wonderful," she told Marcus in the car. "He is. I wish I'd been smart enough to listen to him more often instead of always trying to please my mother." "It's not too late to start." Marcus squeezed her hand. "No, I don't think it is." 6 months into their public relationship, Marcus surprised Amara with plane tickets to Lagos. "I want to show you where I came from," he said. "And I want to meet your grandmother properly in person, not just over video calls." Amara's grandmother was now 83 and still living in the same small apartment where she taught Amara to dance all those years ago. When they arrived, she greeted Marcus with a long, assessing look before breaking into a radiant smile. "You have kind eyes," she declared in Yoruba, which Marcus understood perfectly. "And you make my granddaughter happy. That's all that matters." They spent 2 weeks in Lagos, and Amara fell in love with the city all over again through Marcus's eyes. He showed her the neighborhood where he'd grown up, the school he'd attended, the street corner where he'd sold newspapers to help his parents save money. She introduced him to distant relatives and family friends, watched him charm everyone with his easy manner and genuine interest in their stories. One evening, her grandmother insisted on teaching them a traditional dance together. As they moved through the steps in her tiny living room, Amara realized how far they'd come from that first dance in the ballroom, how much had changed, and yet how the essential connection between them remained constant. "Your grandmother is remarkable," Marcus said later that night as they walked along the beach at Bar Beach, the Atlantic Ocean stretching endlessly before them. "She's lived through so much and she's still so full of joy. She says joy is a choice you make every day, regardless of circumstances." "Smart woman." Marcus stopped walking and turned to face Amara. The moonlight caught in his eyes, making them shine. "I have something I want to ask you." Amara's heart began to race as Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "6 months ago, I was a shell of a person, going through the motions without really living. You changed that. You made me remember what it feels like to hope, to dream, to love without reservation." He opened the box, revealing a stunning ring that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. "Amara Williams, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Amara's face as she nodded, unable to speak. Marcus slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her into a kiss that tasted of salt water and new beginnings. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They called their families that night. Jamal hooped with joy, and Amara's mother cried happy tears. Samuel offered his hearty congratulations and blessings. Even Eleanor, when Marcus called her, managed a stiff, "I suppose congratulations are in order," which felt like a small victory. The rest of their time in Lagos took on a celebratory air. Amara's grandmother insisted on throwing an impromptu engagement party, inviting half the neighborhood. They danced and ate and celebrated under the stars, surrounded by people who loved them and wanted nothing but their happiness. On their last night in the city, Marcus took Amara to a rooftop restaurant overlooking Lagos. As they watched the city lights twinkle below, he told her about his plans for their future. "I've been working with architects on a design for a house," he said. "Nothing as ostentatious as the mansion. Something warm and lived in, with a big kitchen for hosting family dinners and a ballroom. A real ballroom, one that we fill with music and laughter and life." "That sounds perfect. There's more. I want to split our time between Chicago and Lagos. Build a life that honors both parts of who we are. We could start a second branch of the foundation here, work with local schools to provide arts education." "You've really thought this through." "I've thought about nothing else." "Well, that and how stunning you'll look walking down the aisle toward me." They decided on a wedding date 6 months away, enough time to plan something meaningful but not so long that they'd lose momentum. The engagement period passed in a blur of activity: dress fittings, venue tours, guest lists, and endless decisions about flowers and music and catering. But through it all, Amara and Marcus made time for what mattered most: each other. They established routines: morning coffee together, evening walks, weekly date nights where phones were banned. They visited Amara's family in Atlanta regularly, and Jamal, now fully recovered from his accident, formed a genuine friendship with Marcus, the two of them bonding over their shared love of technology and terrible action movies. The media, having exhausted the scandal angle, began writing more positive stories. A major magazine did a feature on Marcus and Amara titled "Love Beyond Boundaries," which focused on how they'd navigated their class differences and built a genuine partnership. The article went viral, sparking conversations about love, class, and what really matters in relationships. "We've become some kind of symbol," Amara said one evening, reading the comments on the article. "Does that bother you?" "I don't know. On one hand, it's nice that our story might help other people feel less alone. On the other hand, we're just two people in love. We're not trying to make a statement." "Maybe the best statements are the ones we don't try to make," Marcus suggested. "We're just living our truth, and people see themselves in that." 2 months before the wedding, Eleanor surprised everyone by calling Marcus and asking to meet with him and Amara together. They arranged to meet at a neutral location, a quiet tea house in downtown Chicago. Eleanor arrived precisely on time, looking as impeccably put together as always, but there was something different in her demeanor. Something softer. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. "I know I haven't made things easy for either of you." "No, you haven't," Marcus agreed bluntly. Eleanor winced but nodded. "Your father and I had lunch last week. He showed me the articles about you too, the interview you did with that magazine. And he asked me a question I couldn't answer." "What question?" Amara asked gently. "He asked me when I'd forgotten that we came to America with nothing. When I'd started believing that money and status mattered more than love and happiness." Eleanor's voice shook slightly. "I couldn't tell him because I don't remember. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what actually matters." Marcus reached across the table and took his mother's hand. "It's not too late to remember." "I want to apologize," Eleanor said, looking directly at Amara for the first time. "To both of you, but especially to you, Amara. I said terrible things, made horrible assumptions about your character without knowing anything about who you really are. I judged you based on circumstances beyond your control, and that was wrong." "Thank you for saying that," Amara replied, surprised by how much the apology meant to her. "I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. I know trust has to be earned. But I would like the chance to try. To get to know the woman my son loves, to understand what he sees in you." Eleanor smiled tentatively. "Your grandmother sounds like a remarkable woman. I'd like to meet her if she'd be willing." Over the following weeks, Eleanor made genuine efforts to build bridges. She attended family dinners, asked thoughtful questions about Amara's plans and dreams, and even apologized to Samuel for her behavior. It wasn't always smooth, old habits died hard, and Eleanor occasionally made comments that revealed her lingering classist attitudes, but she was trying, and that counted for something. The night before the wedding, Amara's mother, grandmother, who had flown in from Lagos, and Eleanor gathered in Amara's hotel room for a pre-wedding celebration. Watching the three older women laugh together over champagne and stories of Marcus and Amara's courtship, Amara felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "What are you thinking?" her mother asked, noticing the tears in Amara's eyes. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am. Not just to have found Marcus, but to have all of you. To have love that crosses boundaries and overcomes obstacles." "Love always does, baby," her grandmother said, pulling her into a hug. "When it's real, when it's meant to be, love finds a way." So before we get to the most beautiful part of this story, the wedding day, I want to ask you to do something for me. If this story has touched your heart, if you've been rooting for Amara and Marcus, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that real love is worth fighting for, no matter what obstacles stand in the way. And drop a comment telling me what you think happens next. Do you think their love story has a happily ever after? Or do you think there are still challenges ahead? I love reading your thoughts. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the September sun casting golden light over the botanical gardens where the ceremony would take place. Amara stood in the bridal suite, her hands shaking slightly as her mother and grandmother helped her into her dress. The gown was a masterpiece, elegant and understated, with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing skirt that made her feel like she was floating. Her grandmother had contributed the traditional Nigerian gele head wrap, a stunning fabric of gold and white that honored her heritage. "You look like a queen," her mother whispered, tears already streaming down her face. A knock on the door interrupted the moment. Jamal poked his head in, his eyes widening when he saw his sister. "Wow. Marcus is going to pass out when he sees you." He stepped fully into the room, looking handsome in his groomsman tuxedo. "Can I have a minute alone with Amara?" The older women tactfully retreated, leaving the siblings alone. Jamal took both of Amara's hands in his. "I never properly thanked you," he said, "for everything you've sacrificed for me and Mom. For working jobs you hated, for sending money you needed, for always putting us first." "Jamal, you don't have to. Let me finish. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. And now you're marrying someone who wants to take care of you for a change. Who sees how extraordinary you are and loves you for it. That makes me happier than you could possibly know." He hugged her tightly. "You deserve this, sis. You deserve all the happiness in the world." By the time Jamal left, Amara was crying, her mother was repairing her makeup, and her grandmother was laughing at the emotional chaos. The ceremony took place in an open-air pavilion surrounded by flowers and trees, with Lake Michigan visible in the distance. 200 guests filled the white chairs, a mix of Amara's family and friends from Atlanta, Marcus's business colleagues and remaining friends, and people from both their lives who had supported them through everything. As the music began and Amara started her walk down the aisle, she saw Marcus waiting at the altar, and the entire world fell away. He looked devastating in his tuxedo, but it was his expression that stole her breath, pure, unguarded joy mixed with love so intense it radiated from him like light. Samuel walked beside Amara, giving her away since her own father wasn't part of her life. When they reached the altar, he kissed her cheek and whispered, "Welcome to the family, daughter," before placing her hand in Marcus's. The ceremony itself passed in a beautiful blur. They'd written their own vows, and when Marcus spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Amara, you danced into my life when I had forgotten how to live. You saw past my walls, past my wealth, past my grief, and you loved the broken man underneath. You made me want to be whole again. Today, I promise to spend every day trying to be worthy of that love. I promise to dance with you through all of life's seasons, the joyful and the sorrowful, the easy and the difficult. I promise to see you, to hear you, to honor the extraordinary woman you are." By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the pavilion, including Amara's. "Marcus," she began, her voice steady despite her tears, "when I took this job as your housekeeper, I never imagined I was walking toward my destiny. You were supposed to be just my employer, nothing more. But you became my friend, my partner, my greatest love. You taught me that I don't have to carry the world alone, that accepting help doesn't make me weak. Today, I promise to build a life with you that honors both of our pasts while embracing our future. I promise to keep dancing, to keep loving, to keep choosing joy even when life gets hard. And I promise to never stop seeing the beautiful man behind the cold billionaire facade." They exchanged rings. Marcus's was a simple platinum band, Amara's matched her engagement ring, and when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus swept Amara into a kiss that felt like coming home and starting an adventure all at once. The reception was held in a renovated industrial space that had been transformed into a magical wonderland of lights and flowers. But the centerpiece was the dance floor, where a live band played a mix of contemporary and traditional Nigerian music. For their first dance, Marcus and Amara had chosen a song that blended both their cultures, starting with a slow waltz before transitioning into an upbeat Afrobeat rhythm. As they moved across the floor, their bodies in perfect synchronization from months of practice, Amara remembered that first dance in the ballroom where everything had begun. "What are you thinking?" Marcus murmured in her ear during a slow turn. "That I'm grateful I was dancing that day. That you walked in. That we were brave enough to take a chance on something impossible. It was never impossible. It was inevitable. We were inevitable." As the song shifted tempo, they pulled apart and began the Afrobeat section, their movements more energetic and joyful. The crowd erupted in cheers, and soon other guests flooded the dance floor, joining in the celebration. Amara danced with Jamal, who had become surprisingly good at following her lead. She danced with Samuel, who had tears in his eyes as he told her how happy she made his son. She even danced with Eleanor, who held her stiffly at first but gradually relaxed, admitting, "I can see why Marcus fell in love with you. You're impossible not to love." But her favorite dance of the night, besides her first dance with Marcus, was with her grandmother. As they moved slowly to a traditional Nigerian song, her grandmother whispered in Yoruba, "You found your destiny, child. Not the one you planned, but the one that was always waiting for you. I almost didn't take the job, Grandma. I almost stayed in Atlanta. But you didn't. Because deep down, you knew there was something more waiting for you. Trust your instincts. They led you here, and they'll keep leading you to where you need to be." As midnight approached, Marcus pulled Amara aside to a quiet balcony overlooking the city. The sounds of the party drifted through the open doors behind them, but out here it was just the two of them and the Chicago skyline. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Okonkwo?" Marcus asked, pulling her close. Amara laughed, still getting used to her new name. "Like I'm living in a dream. A beautiful, terrifying, wonderful dream." It's not a dream. It's real. We're real. Marcus kissed her forehead. And tomorrow, we start our real life together. Tomorrow and every day after. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle like earthbound stars, both of them thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a chance encounter in a forbidden ballroom to this balcony on their wedding night, every step had been both difficult and worth it. Do you ever regret it? Amara asked softly. Stepping down as CEO, dealing with all the judgment and criticism? Never. Not for a single second. Marcus turned her to face him. I spent 2 years as a walking corpse, and you made me human again. You gave me back my life. How could I regret that? I love you, Marcus Okonkwo. I love you, Amara Okonkwo. She grinned. And I can't wait to spend the rest of my life proving it. They returned to the party hand in hand, ready to dance until dawn with the people who had supported them, fought for them, and loved them through everything. As Marcus spun Amara across the dance floor one more time, she caught sight of her reflection in the glass windows and barely recognized herself. She looked radiant, confident, completely and utterly happy. She was no longer the invisible maid or the girl struggling to keep her family afloat. She was Amara Okonkwo, a woman who had dared to reach for an impossible love and found that it wasn't impossible after all. And as the night wore on and the celebration continued, Amara knew that this wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning. 3 years later, Amara stood in the newly completed ballroom of their custom-built home, watching as dozens of children from the Keisha Okonkwo Foundation's summer program filled the space with laughter and music. This ballroom was nothing like the one in Marcus's old mansion. It was brighter, warmer, designed specifically to be used and loved rather than preserved as a monument to the past. Mrs. Okonkwo. A young girl named Imani rushed over, her eyes bright with excitement. I learned the dance you taught us. Want to see? Always, Amara replied, settling into a chair as Imani performed a beautiful fusion of ballet and traditional African dance. When she finished, Amara applauded enthusiastically. Magnificent! You're a natural. My mom says I should thank you and Mr. Okonkwo for the dance classes. We couldn't afford them before. Your mom can thank you for working so hard. The foundation just opened the door, you walked through it all on your own. As Imani ran off to show her friends another move, Marcus appeared at Amara's side, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. He'd just come from a mentoring session with a group of young entrepreneurs, one of the many ways he spent his time since leaving his CEO role. How was the session? Amara asked, accepting the lemonade gratefully. The Chicago summer heat was intense, even with the ballroom's excellent air conditioning. Inspiring. One of the kids has an idea for an app that could revolutionize community organizing. I connected him with some potential investors. Marcus sat beside her, watching the children dance. Days like this, I wonder why I ever thought sitting in boardrooms was the height of success. You needed to do that first to get here, Amara pointed out. Everything happens in its time. Over the past 3 years, their life had evolved in ways neither could have predicted. The foundation had grown beyond their wildest dreams, now operating in 12 cities across the U.S. and 3 locations in Nigeria. They'd helped thousands of children access arts education, provided scholarships, built community centers. Amara had discovered a natural talent for nonprofit management and now served as the foundation's executive director, using all those organizational skills she'd honed while juggling multiple jobs and family responsibilities. She'd completed her degree online and was considering pursuing a master's in nonprofit leadership. Marcus had found fulfillment in angel investing and mentorship, using his business expertise to help diverse entrepreneurs who might not otherwise have access to capital or guidance. He also served on several nonprofit boards and had become an advocate for work-life balance in the tech industry, speaking openly about his own journey from workaholic CEO to fulfilled human being. Their personal life was equally rich. They split their time between Chicago and Lagos, maintaining homes in both cities and building community wherever they went. Amara's mother had moved into a cottage on their Chicago property, her health stabilized and her spirits lifted by being near her daughter. Jamal had graduated with honors and now worked as an engineer at one of Marcus's former competitors, a source of endless teasing at family dinners. The most surprising development had been Eleanor's transformation. Once she'd dropped her prejudices and actually gotten to know Amara, she'd become one of their strongest supporters. She volunteered regularly at the foundation, using her organizational skills and connections to open doors for the kids in the program. She and Amara's grandmother had formed an unlikely friendship, the two matriarchs often ganging up on Marcus and Amara with unsolicited advice delivered with love. "There's something I need to tell you," Marcus said, breaking into Amara's thoughts. She turned to him, noticing a nervous excitement in his expression. "What is it?" "I got a call this morning. The foundation board wants to expand into West Africa more aggressively. They're talking about opening locations in Ghana, Senegal, Kenya. It would mean more travel, more time away from Chicago." "That's incredible. That's what we've been working toward. But it would also mean big changes for us. We might need to consider relocating to Lagos for a year or two to oversee the expansion properly." Amara thought about it, realized she wasn't scared or resistant. "Then we'll do it. We'll relocate." "Just like that? No hesitation?" "Marcus, 3 years ago I was terrified of every change, every risk. But you taught me that the best things in life require leaping without a net. So yes, just like that. If it means helping more kids discover their talents and passions, then we'll figure out the logistics." He kissed her, soft and sweet, his hand coming to rest on her still flat stomach. "Even with a baby on the way?" Amara's eyes widened. "How did you? I only took the test this morning. I was going to tell you tonight. I saw the pregnancy test box in the bathroom trash when I was looking for dental floss. I didn't want to say anything until you were ready." His eyes shone with tears. "We're having a baby?" "We're having a baby," Amara confirmed, her own eyes filling up. "I know we hadn't exactly planned the timing. The timing is perfect. Everything with us has always been perfectly imperfect timing." Marcus pulled her up and, mindful of their young audience, gave her a careful spin before pulling her close. "Dance with me, Mrs. Okonkwo." "There's no music playing," Amara pointed out, laughing. "We don't need music. We never really did." They swayed together in the ballroom filled with dancing children, both of them thinking about the unexpected journey that had brought them here. From a forbidden dance in an empty room to this moment, surrounded by life and laughter and love, every step had been worth it. Later that evening, after the foundation event ended and the children had gone home, Amara and Marcus walked through their house, turning off lights and tidying up. The place was finally starting to feel lived in, filled with the comfortable clutter of a real home rather than the sterile perfection of Marcus's old mansion. "I've been thinking about names," Marcus said as they climbed the stairs to their bedroom. "If it's a girl, I'd like to name her Keisha. As a way of honoring the woman who taught me how to love in the first place." Amara stopped on the landing, touched beyond words. "That's beautiful. She'd be honored. And if it's a boy, maybe Samuel, after my father. The man who reminded me that true success isn't measured in dollar signs." "Perfect. Though knowing our families, they're going to lobby hard for traditional Nigerian names as middle names." Marcus laughed. "Undoubtedly. Your grandmother has probably already prepared a list." In their bedroom, they got ready for bed with the easy-reach continuetic comfort of long familiarity. Marcus had just turned off the bedside lamp when Amara spoke into the darkness. "Do you ever think about that day? The day you walked in on me dancing?" "All the time. It was the day my life started again. I was so terrified. I thought you were going to fire me on the spot." "I almost did," Marcus admitted. "My first instinct was anger. Someone had violated the sanctity of Keisha's space. But then I really looked at you, saw the pure joy on your face, and something inside me cracked open. For the first time since Keisha died, I felt something other than numbness." Amara rolled over to face him in the darkness. "What if you hadn't asked me to dance? What if you just walked away? Then I'd still be that hollow man, going through the motions of living without actually being alive. And you'd probably be working yourself to exhaustion in some other job, still carrying the world on your shoulders alone." He found her hand under the covers and laced their fingers together. But we didn't walk away. We took a chance on something that seemed impossible, and look where it led us. To a life better than anything I could have imagined. Same. Though I have to admit, when I first saw you dancing, I never imagined we'd end up here. Married, starting a family, running a foundation together, planning to move to Lagos for a few years. Life has a funny way of surprising us, Amara said. My grandmother always says that when you stop trying to control everything and just let life flow, that's when the magic happens. Your grandmother is the wisest person I know. They lay in comfortable silence for a while, both drifting toward sleep. But Amara had one more question. Marcus? Do you ever regret the life you gave up? The power, the prestige, being CEO of a major tech company? Never. Not even a little bit. His voice was firm in the darkness. I had all those things, Amara, and I was miserable. Now I have less money, less influence, less of what the world considers important. But I have you. I have purpose. I have joy. I have a life worth living rather than just surviving. That's not a trade-off, that's an upgrade. Even when your old colleagues treat you like you've lost your mind? Especially then. Because their pity tells me they don't understand what actually matters. And honestly, I feel sorry for them, trapped in the same cycle I was in, measuring their worth by their bank accounts and their titles. You're a good man, Marcus Okonkwo. I'm a lucky man. And I'm only good because you make me want to be. The next morning, they called their families to share the pregnancy news. The reactions were exactly as expected. Amara's mother cried happy tears, Jamal hooped so loudly they had to hold the phone away from their ears, Samuel offered dignified congratulations that couldn't hide his joy, and Eleanor immediately began planning a baby shower with Amara's grandmother. I'm going to be a great-grandmother, Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. I never thought I'd live to see this day. You have plenty of years ahead of you, Mother, Marcus assured her. Still, after the way I treated you both at the beginning, I'm grateful you're giving me the chance to be part of this child's life. After the calls, Marcus had to leave for a mentoring session, kissing Amara goodbye with a promise to be back for lunch. Alone in the house, Amara found herself wandering to the ballroom. She stood in the center of the space, remembering that first dance with Marcus, the fear and excitement and the sense that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't predict. She pulled out her phone and selected a song at random, then closed her eyes and began to dance. Her body moved instinctively, muscle memory from years of practice guiding her through turns and steps. But this time, she danced for herself, for the joy of movement, for the baby growing inside her, for the life she'd built against all odds. She didn't hear Marcus return early, didn't know he was watching from the doorway until the song ended and she opened her eyes to find him there, his expression soft with love. Some things never change, he said, walking toward her. You're still the most beautiful thing I've ever seen when you dance. Want to join me? Amara extended her hand, echoing that first invitation she'd accepted 3 years ago. Marcus took her hand, pulling her close. Always. They danced together in their ballroom, the space filled with afternoon sunlight and the promise of all the tomorrows stretching ahead of them. There was no audience, no pressure, no judgment. Just two people who had found each other against impossible odds and chosen love over everything else. When the song ended, they stood holding each other, both thinking about how far they'd come and how much further they had yet to go. Thank you, Amara whispered. For what? For walking through that door 3 years ago. For asking me to dance. For not giving up on us when things got hard. For showing me that fairy tales can come true, even for girls from modest backgrounds who dare to dream. You don't need to thank me for any of that. Loving you has been the easiest thing I've ever done. Marcus rested his forehead against hers. The hard part was almost missing it. Almost letting fear and propriety and what other people thought keep me from the best thing that ever happened to me. We both almost missed it, Amara agreed. But we didn't. We were brave. We were terrified. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing it anyway. They swayed together gently, no music playing but not needing any. The rhythm of their hearts, the harmony of their breathing, the synchronicity of 3 years of partnership, That was music enough. 5 months later, Amara stood in that same ballroom, now 8 months pregnant, watching as the foundation hosted its annual gala. The event had grown each year, and this time they'd invited foundation kids to perform alongside professional dancers, creating a beautiful showcase of talent and possibility. Imani, the young girl who'd shown Amara her dance months ago, was the star of the evening. Her performance brought the crowd to its feet, and when she took her bow, tears of joy streaming down her face, Amara felt her own eyes fill up. "That was us once," Marcus murmured in her ear. "Young and full of dreams, dancing for the joy of it." "That's us now," Amara corrected. "We're still dancing, still dreaming. We've just learned to share the stage with others." The gala raised over $2 million for the foundation, enough to fund their West African expansion and then some. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, many stopped to congratulate Amara and Marcus on the baby, to share their own stories of how the foundation had impacted their children, to express gratitude for the work they were doing. Victoria Wellington, the woman who had tried to seduce Marcus at that first gala 3 years ago, approached with her new husband. "I have to admit," she said with genuine warmth, "I was wrong about you too. I thought Marcus had lost his mind, but you've clearly gained something much more valuable than what you gave up." "We both did," Marcus replied, his arm around Amara's waist. After everyone had left and the cleaning crew was packing up, Amara and Marcus walked through the empty ballroom one last time. In a few months, they'd be in Lagos, preparing for the baby's arrival and overseeing the foundation's expansion. The house would be rented out to a family who promised to love it as much as they did, with the stipulation that the ballroom remain available for foundation events. "Are you scared?" Marcus asked. "About the move, the baby, all the changes ahead?" "A little," Amara admitted. "But mostly I'm excited. 3 years ago, I couldn't have handled all this uncertainty. Now I know that as long as we face it together, we can handle anything." "When did you get so wise?" "I married a good teacher." They turned off the lights and headed upstairs, ready to rest before the next adventure began. As they passed the mirror in the hallway, Amara caught sight of their reflection, Marcus with his hand protectively on her swollen belly, both of them smiling, both of them transformed from the people they'd been when they first met. The cold billionaire and the dancing maid were gone, replaced by partners, lovers, best friends building a life that honored both their pasts and their future. 4 weeks later, on a rainy Tuesday morning in Lagos, Amara went into labor. The birth was long and difficult, but when she finally held her daughter, Keisha Blessing Okonkwo, with Blessing being the traditional name Amara's grandmother had indeed lobbied for, every moment of pain was forgotten. Marcus held his daughter with tears streaming down his face, gently rocking her as she made small mewling sounds. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's absolutely perfect. Just like her father," Amara said, exhausted but radiant. As family members crowded into the hospital room, both grandmothers, Jamal, Samuel, even Eleanor who had flown in from New York, Amara watched Marcus introduce his daughter to each of them. The love in the room was palpable, overwhelming, beautiful. Her grandmother approached the bed, settling into the chair beside Amara with some difficulty. "You did good, child. The dance brought you exactly where you needed to be." "The dance? Life is a dance, baby. Sometimes you lead, sometimes you follow, sometimes you improvise. But the most important thing is choosing the right partner." Her grandmother looked at Marcus, who was letting Eleanor hold the baby while he wiped his eyes. "You chose well. I got lucky. Luck is just preparation meeting opportunity. You prepared your whole life for this. Learning to be strong, learning to be generous, learning to love without reservation. And when the opportunity came, you were ready to take it, even though it scared you." Over the next few days, as Amara recovered and learned to navigate the overwhelming reality of new motherhood, Marcus proved to be a natural father. He changed diapers without complaint, mastered swaddling, spent hours just staring at his daughter's face with wonder. "I was so scared I wouldn't know how to do this," he admitted one night as they sat together, Marcus holding Keisha while Amara dozed against his shoulder. "After Keisha, the first Keisha, after we lost her, we talked about having kids someday. When she died, I thought that dream died with her. I never imagined I'd get a second chance. You're a wonderful father, Amara murmured sleepily. Natural at it. Only because I have you to show me how. You're amazing with her. I'm terrified I'm going to mess it up. We'll mess it up together. That's what partners do. 3 months later, with baby Keisha thriving and Amara mostly recovered, they threw themselves into the Foundation's West African expansion. They'd rented a beautiful house in Lekki, one of Lagos's upscale neighborhoods, that somehow managed to feel both luxurious and homey. Amara's grandmother visited often, delighted to have her great-granddaughters so close. The work was challenging but rewarding. They faced bureaucratic hurdles, cultural differences, and the complexities of operating across multiple countries. But they also met incredible people, local educators, passionate artists, community leaders, all working toward the same goal of giving children opportunities to discover and develop their talents. One afternoon, as Amara nursed Keisha while reviewing grant applications, Marcus looked up from his laptop with a thoughtful expression. You know what I just realized? We've built exactly the life Keisha wanted. Not Keisha my wife, though she'd approve. Keisha the dream, community, purpose, family, impact. This is what success actually looks like. And it started with a dance, Amara said with a smile. One forbidden dance in an empty ballroom. Best decision I ever made, walking through that door. Best decision I ever made, not running away when you did. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds Keisha's contented nursing and the distant calls of street vendors outside. Lagos thrummed with life beyond their windows, chaotic, vibrant, beautiful, and Amara felt completely at peace. A year later, they stood in that same house, surrounded by Foundation staff and local partners, celebrating the successful launch of programs in 5 West African countries. Hundreds of children now had access to arts education because of their work. Dozens of community centers had been built. Local artists had been hired as instructors, creating jobs and preserving traditional art forms while teaching contemporary techniques. Speech, someone called out, and the crowd took up the chant. Speech! Speech! Marcus and Amara exchanged glances, a lifetime of communication passing between them in that single look. Then Marcus raised his hand for quiet. 4 years ago, he began, I was a man who had forgotten how to live. I measured my worth by my company's stock price and my calendar's fullness. I thought success meant working 80-hour weeks and sacrificing everything personal for professional gain. He looked at Amara, his eyes shining. Then this extraordinary woman danced into my life and taught me what success actually means. It means impact, connection, purpose. It means dancing even when the world tells you to sit still. Amara stepped forward, taking the metaphorical microphone. And 4 years ago, I was a woman so focused on survival that I'd forgotten about living. I thought my worth was defined by how much I could sacrifice, how much weight I could carry alone. She looked at Marcus, then at their sleeping daughter in her grandmother's arms. Then this man showed me that accepting love isn't weakness, that building a life together is stronger than struggling alone, and that sometimes the impossible is just the possible in disguise. The crowd erupted in applause, and as the celebration continued around them, Marcus pulled Amara close. Want to dance? He asked, just as he had that first day in the ballroom. Always, she replied, just as she had every time since. They moved to the center of the room, and someone started music, a beautiful fusion of American R&B and Nigerian Afrobeat. As they danced, others joined them, until the entire room was filled with movement and joy and life. This was their legacy, Amara thought as she spun in Marcus's arms. Not the money they'd earned or the company he'd built, but this community, connection, the ripple effects of love and courage. Children discovering their talents. Families finding hope. 2 broken people healing each other and then turning that healing outward to touch hundreds of other lives. The cold billionaire had learned to feel again. The dancing maid had claimed her place in the world. And together, they'd created something neither could have built alone. As the song ended and they stood in each other's arms, surrounded by people whose lives they'd touched and who had touched theirs in return, Marcus whispered in Amara's ear. Thank you for dancing with me that day. "Thank you for asking," Amara replied. "And for never stopping." They stayed in Lagos for 2 more years, expanding the foundation's reach and deepening their roots in the community. Keisha grew into a vibrant toddler who loved music and movement, already showing signs of inheriting both her parents' passion for dance and her father's analytical mind. Eventually, they returned to Chicago, but they were different people than when they'd left. Richer in experiences, deeper in wisdom, more committed than ever to living a life defined by impact rather than income. The ballroom in their Chicago home became exactly what they'd envisioned, a space filled with life and laughter, where foundation kids practiced, where family gatherings happened, where Amara and Marcus still danced together whenever the mood struck them. And years later, when little Keisha was old enough to ask how mommy and daddy met, they would take her to that ballroom, put on music, and show her. "We met through dance," Amara would say, taking Marcus's hand. "Your mother danced her way into my heart," Marcus would add, spinning Amara around as Keisha giggled. And they would dance together, the 3 of them, in the ballroom where 2 unlikely hearts had first found their rhythm, proving that love, real, courageous, transformative love, could overcome any obstacle, bridge any gap, and create something beautiful from the most unexpected beginnings. The cold billionaire had walked in on his dancing maid, and what he did next shocked everyone, including himself. He fell in love. He changed his life. He chose happiness over status, love over legacy, and in doing so, he found both. And they danced happily ever after. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more interesting stories.